Let's bring in Chris Mannix from Sports Illustrated. He covers the NBA and also boxing, which will touch on the new heavyweight champ of the world. Good morning, Chris.
What's happening, Dan?
Oh, we're just getting ready. The big 3-on-3 league with the Danettes coming up a little bit later on today.
Well, I hear Ricky Rubio is still available on the market.
I don't know if he'd make the starting lineup, but maybe there's a spot for Ricky Rubio on one of the teams.
I mean, I think we're probably a year away from Ricky showcasing that three-point shot he's been marinating for the better part of the last decade.
What happened to your boyfriend, Ricky Rubio?
I bring it up because I just saw some Spanish report where it said it's your show, Dan, that has created this monster. By the way, that every time there's like a Ricky Rubio story, I get like 25 tweets like tagged with Ricky Rubio stuff. But apparently the Jazz not interested in bringing back Ricky Rubio.
We just had a discussion, I guess you could call it, that is Andre Iguodala on his way to the Hall of Fame?
I saw some of that yesterday. It's like the Robert Horry debate, right? Like, the great role player on the championship teams. Iguodala is a little bit different because we forget early in his career how really good he was on both ends in Philadelphia. But I don't know. He's kind of the hall of very good. And if you want to create like a subsection for players like him and Horry who are indispensable on championship teams, that's fine, but I can't put him in the Hall of Fame.
Okay, what's the difference between Ginobili and Iguodala?
Oh, I think Ginobili for almost, how long did he play? 2 decades. First of all, the number of championships that he was a driving force on, and I use that phrase because offensively, 4 for Ginobili? He wasn't part of the first one with Duncan, but the last ones, the shots he made. Like, Iguodala's made some big shots in his life, but he's known in NBA circles primarily for the defensive stops that he makes and how he's so versatile on that end of the floor. Mm-hmm. So I think just offensively, Ginobili was just more impactful than Iguodala ever was.
Yeah, Iguodala was a better player. I think that Ginobili was more important to his championship teams. If
but you think Iguodala's a better player than Ginobili?
Yeah, he was better at. He had a higher level that he played at than Ginobili did. I mean, Ginobili was very good, and I think he's a Hall of Famer. I think that when Iguodala was on his own as a number one guy on his team, Ginobili was never the number one guy, not even close to being the number one guy.
I'd have to go back and look, but were those Philly teams any good that Iguodala was?
No, but he was still the guy. Ginobili, if you're the third or fourth option, what a luxury.
Yeah, but isn't the argument that Ginobili could have been what Iguodala was?
But he wasn't.
That opportunity.
But he wasn't. I'm just saying Iguodala was the go-to guy for a while, and he's a great defender. If you look at over 1,500 steals and over 500 block shots of active players, there's only 4 guys, and that's including Dwayne Wade, who just retired. LeBron is on that list, and Iguodala. So, he played at a pretty high level. I just think he's sort of had a coming out party, an overnight sensation by what he does in the postseason during the NBA Finals. Other than that, nobody talks about him.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, his defense is unparalleled that in the playoffs, just because he steps in and just stops or becomes a stopper on everybody. You can just work him on guys at 3 different positions. I don't know. I mean, I think if Manu had his own team, he's probably a 25 point per game scorer, and we're talking about him in an entirely different way. I just think his greatest strength was his willingness to accept whatever role he had and to thrive in it. And that's something I think that separates him from everybody else.
And Iguodala's doing that right now.
He is.
He's done that.
I mean, do you think Iguodala, when Iguodala came, and I forget what year it was he first came to Golden State, he wasn't the player that he was, at least not offensively, that he was in Philadelphia. It was at a different stage of his career.
No. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think Ginobili's a Hall of Famer. I don't think Iguodala is. I think he's there because he's winning championships, that he's going to get a little bit more. It's almost like Edelman. Edelman is going to be viewed as a Hall of Famer, borderline Hall of Famer, because he's won championships. And you can't tell the history of the NFL without Julian Edelman in two of the greatest catches in NFL history. So I sort of look at maybe there's parallels there. Biggest question going into Game 3 for you is what?
Health of Klay Thompson. I mean, that's easy. I mean, he's questionable with the hamstring injury right now, and when I hear that, Dan, I think at best he's going to go out there and play. But guys don't just. It's not like you're playing through a cracked bone in your hand or some kind of elbow problem or shoulder problem that you can sort of will the pain away. You can't move when you're out there, and a team as smart as Toronto, and we saw kind of the intelligence of Nick Nurse in Game 2 when he went to that box and one, which I had never seen Toronto do ever at any points during the season or the playoffs. But when he went to that box and one, he really slowed that Warrior offense down. And now he's got 2 days to prepare for what's probably going to be a hobbled Klay Thompson. And defensively, they're going to go at him. Like, whoever Klay's guarding, they're going to go at him and try to turn him into a liability on that end of the floor and force Steve Kerr to compensate. So Klay is the wild card in all this. If he's not, 80, 85% and able to move with some fluidity, it's going to be problematic.
Yeah, I think that Toronto lost the finals, and I know we still have games to play, but I think they look back on Game 2, and they allowed that one to get away from them, and there was no excuse for that. You got a wounded Golden State team on the road, and you couldn't close them out. I think that's going to come back and haunt them. Yeah,
I agree. I look at the Kyle Lowry game. It was reminiscent of, I forget what game it was against Milwaukee when Lowry fouled out early, just making some kind of dumb fouls and dumb plays in that. But this Raptors team has shown some resilience here. I mean, Golden State's not Milwaukee, but down 2-0 against the Bucks and the Raptors rallied. I mean, I know they just lost home court, but I wrote this after the game on Sunday. Like, if you're Toronto, you did kind of kick that game away. You missed a lot of shots you're probably not going to miss in Game 3. There's a lot of pressure on you now because you're going back to Oakland, this situation, but you're still facing a wounded beast out there. There's not going to be a Durant on the floor in Game 3. There may not be Klay Thompson on the floor in Game 3. You've got to go into that game thinking you're a favorite, don't you? That if it's just Steph and Draymond, you can scheme for that, and you can try to expose some of the other non-shooters that Golden State's throwing out there on the floor. Not to mention, I don't know what Kevin Looney's situation is going to be at this point. That's another big that Golden State will be without, and they're going to be relying on Bogut, who has given them decent minutes, and Cousins, who was gassed out there at the end. I mean, I still think Toronto's in a pretty good situation here.
I would run that box and one. If there's no Klay and no Kevin Durant, I'm coming out and playing a box and one on Steph Curry.
Yeah, I would too. I mean, it was really effective.
It was. I thought it was great it just brought back bad high school memories. And I thought, no wonder Steph called it janky defense. Nobody wants to face a box and one.
No, and look, this again, it's this is why they hired Nick Nurse. He's kind of got that mad scientist mind that allows him to adjust and use different lineups and use different defenses like that. I mean, I am a huge Dwayne Casey fan. I think he's an excellent coach, but I don't think Dwayne Casey would have done that. I mean, I don't think he would have adjusted in the same way that Nick Nurse did. This is where, coaching in a situation like that has real value.
We're talking to Chris Mannix from Sports Illustrated, senior NBA writer, also boxing writer, and he was there ringside for the big heavyweight bout between Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz Jr. III. This wasn't supposed to happen. When did you know something was up there, Chris, that we could see one of the bigger surprises in the heavyweight history?
I mean, third round, which was the round of the year, hands down, one of the best rounds I've ever seen in person. And it's where I, as a broadcaster, and you know how this feels, I'm sure, Dan, sometimes I put my foot squarely into my mouth because Anthony Joshua knocked down Andy Ruiz with a huge left hand, the kind of left hand that guys don't recover from. So in that moment, I think I said something along the lines of, Anthony Joshua is a composed, ferocious finisher. Everybody watch this. And then Anthony Joshua was knocked down right after that. So it was not my finest moment as a broadcaster. But look, nobody that's the big thing. Like, people that can that say Andy Ruiz is some big fat guy who shouldn't have been in this fight. I mean, that's just dumb. Like, this was a heralded prospect that Bob Arum's Top Rank groomed from the early stages. He had some conditioning issues, clearly. He wasn't as committed as he needed to be. But this is a talented guy with one loss on his resume, and that came in a world championship fight that he lost by like 1 round. So he came in with a pedigree. What I didn't think, and nobody believed, was that after taking a shot like that, he'd be able to come up and answer in the way that he did. That's where the big surprise was, and that was where the entire fight changed. This fight officially, Dan, will go down as having ended in the 7th round. It was over in the 3rd round. Anthony Joshua was done after getting knocked down and beat up so much in that 3rd round.
But Ruiz and what he looks like and who he represents, Mexican Americans, and being the heavyweight champ of the world, I thought this was a great thing for heavyweight boxing. I saw a lot of commentary to the contrary that we were looking for that showdown with Joshua and Wilder, Fury thrown in there. I said, you got somebody. He's like John Daly when John Daly came out of nowhere to win the PGA championship. You went, who is this? And this is something completely different than we've seen in the sport.
Oh, I completely agree. And that was my first reaction right afterwards. Now, I might have a different opinion if the Wilder fight was scheduled for the fall, but it wasn't. Wilder had decided he was going to take a rematch with Luis Ortiz in September, and he announced the fight with Tyson Fury for early 2020. So we weren't getting Joshua versus Wilder anyway. And there's a part of me that is still disappointed that we're, because of the politics and the greed that's involved with boxing promoters, that we're not going to get Joshua Wilder at its apex, what it could have been the biggest fight in this, at least in heavyweight division, this century. All that being said, you now have a new player in the heavyweight division. You now have a rematch that's going to take place in the fall that everybody's going to watch. I bet, Dan, that none of your listeners and everybody that in your studio knows who Anthony Joshua was scheduled to face next. It was a guy named Kubrat Pulev, probably in the UK, that nobody was going to watch fight. Now, I'm guessing that when this fight's announced, probably November, December, at Wembley Stadium or someplace in the UK, I bet everybody's going to watch and see if Andy Ruiz can go in front of 80,000.
Chris, speaking on behalf of the Nets, we're huge Cougar Pugrat fans. We always have been.
Not even close to what his name is.
He's joining us next. He's coming up next hour here on the show.
Had him booked for months.
Yeah, we've had him. We had him. Fritzy booked him in April.
Did he call him Cougar Pulev?
I think so.
Didn't quite catch that.
I think so. Yeah, I think we need to come up with a new heavyweight belt, the WTF, as we give that to Andy Ruiz. We got the IBF, WBC, WBA, and the WTF.
But Dan, you'll probably watch though, to see if he can do it in front of 60,000 crazy pro Joshua fans at Wembley Stadium or wherever it is, and you'll probably wonder, if Anthony Joshua loses this next fight, that's when his career might be over. That's when it might be unrecoverable at that point. Just one thing about Joshua. He's 6'6" and fights like a guy 6 inches shorter. If Emmanuel Stewart was still alive, he'd need to be paired with someone like that to be using the jab more than anything else.
Thank you, Chris.
You guys, Dan.
That's Chris Mannix, Sports Illustrated senior NBA and boxing writer covering boxing for DAZN.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune into Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV. Stream for free on BR Live or download the Dan Patrick Show app.